grandmother, Vivian, kept all over her house. Dru shouldn't care about his plans until their meeting later. His personal life was his own business. Except every time he was back, only twice a year now, for Vivian's birthday and Christmas, a weak part of Dru managed to care a little more. And this trip, he'd homed in on her like a detective casing a crime suspect. They usually kept out of each other's way until he returned to the other side of the state, agreeing, without ever speaking about it, that there was nothing left to say to each other. They no longer had that luxury, but did he still have to make her feel like she was 16 and he was 18, and he'd just rejected her after she'd thrown herself at him? "Brad?" She raised an eyebrow. Their past bit at her, a swarm of bloodthirsty mosquitoes closing in for the kill. "I told you I was tied up until 8. "I know." He half smiled his way back into her life. "I got away from Savannah early. I'm your punching bag for the night." "Excuse me?" She'd fantasized about taking a swipe at him. Instead, they'd stuck to their version of "you're dead to me," which could have rocked on indefinitely, if it weren't for Vivian Douglas. Vi, to those closest to her, was a town matriarch. She was as outrageous and difficult for most people to fathom as she was generous to a fault, and she'd asked for the grandson she'd raised from the cradle. It was time to tell him things she'd put off letting even Dru know until last weekend, though for years now Vi had depended on Dru's help. Dru owed Vivian more than she could possibly repay. The eccentric woman was as responsible for what Dru had now as Dru's foster parents were, so she'd sucked it up and summoned the last person on Earth she'd intended to be this close to again. Brad shifted his oversized workout bag higher on his shoulder. Her attention snapped away from admiring how the fabric of his SPD t-shirt stretched across his pecs. His bag's familiar shape registered. Her pulse skidded to a halt. He absolutely couldn't be. "I'm your Rad Kid's partner tonight." He whipped off his sunglasses, revealing even bluer eyes than hers. His full lips flattened to a grim line. "Travis said he'd talk to you. He reached me on my cell when he heard I was heading home. He wrenched his back on a call this morning, so I'm your target tonight while your kids test their self-defense skills. I picked up his gear. These are my sparring pads. The kids are in my Jeep." Travis. Her foster brother wasn't going to make the final night of her 6-week Rad Kids course, the most important session for students training to avoid and, if needed, defend themselves against bullying or dangerous situations or even physical attack. And without talking with Dru first, her brother had sent Brad as his stand-in. "You've wasted a trip," she said, smelling a rat. "You can't be part of my class. This program doesn't allow adults to work with the kids unless they've gone through training," Brad said. "Yeah, I know." He grinned, and she liked it. She loved it. She always had. He could laugh at himself or anything else and make her forget the world around them, until Brad alone was there, in her thoughts, filling them up, lightening them, calming unsettled parts of her no one else saw. They'd been childhood friends because he'd first hung out with Travis and Oliver, another of her foster brothers. At age 16, she'd convinced herself Brad had wanted more with her than being buddies, after months of his fingers brushing hers, his hanging around the Dixon house even when she was the only one there to talk to, and dancing with her at the spring dance that another boy had asked her to, holding her close, leaning in, acting as if he'd wanted to kiss her, until Oliver had shown up and he and Brad had gone off somewhere drinking. She'd been so sure he'd been feeling the same pull she had. She'd been mortifyingly wrong. She realized she'd inched away from him. "You have no business here." She stepped closer than before to prove that she wasn't afraid of him. "I'll deal with Travis later, and I'll see you and Horace tonight at the house."